like this of McFarlane. I like that of Eric Larson because those two are like my favorites out of the Image guys. And you already know my thoughts about Rob Liefeld. And I don't want to make myself mad, nor do I want to end up clowning on this guy. I feel sorry for him a little bit. I heard your podcast today with Michael Bailey, and it almost got me thinking, yeah, Rob is just acting like a man with nothing to lose.
I'll be honest with you. Like, that was recorded a while back, and some of that
I thought it was recent.
No, that was October.
Oh,
that was back when we did the first episode of Marvel Handbook. Me and Matt Bailey have only talked one time, and so that's months old material.
No, it sounded new to me. Yeah. I mean, you had me fooled. I'm thinking that just came out today. I'm like, oh, he's right on the money.
and I'll be honest with you. In recent months, I've really been reevaluating Liefeld, and I appreciate what he did at Image, but the man himself has I'm really souring on him lately. And part of it was like I just appreciated the impact he and the Image founders had, and I do think that he gets beat up a lot, but also he's really asking for it at this point, and so it's really hard for me to defend the guy. So I'm not.
Well, before when I was like in high school, I'm like, oh yeah, he's not that bad. And then when I got out of high school, I'm like, the people like when I was starting to really, really buy a bunch of comics and read a bunch of them because I don't know, I had a comic shop in my town. So what happened was I just bought 4 stacks of everything. I'm like, okay, I'm buying Spawn this week. I'm buying Savage Dragon next week. I'll buy Superman here. I wasn't buying a whole lot of Batman, but I was trying to read what I could. And I don't know, the Youngblood stuff, I never really went out my way to go hurt myself to go buy. It was like, how can I say it? I looked at it and go, I'm trying to find Alan Moore stuff, and I couldn't find it. So, how can I put it? What's the best way to say this? I don't know. He wasn't on my mind at the time. And I know the Deadpool video game had came out, but still Deadpool was like an annoyance, and Harley Quinn didn't become, like what she is today. So at the time I'm thinking, Deadpool's all right. I mean, he ain't Deathstroke, but, he's cool. And then the movie came out, and then like my mind flipped. I'm like, no, well, Liefeld ain't. All right, Liefeld made this one character like played by Ryan Reynolds, who's like very funny by himself, who might as well have been auditioning for Deadpool in his other movies like Blade Trinity and stuff like that, and maybe Van Wilder if you want to count it. But I don't know, with me and my relationship with Deadpool it's like I like the character in the movie, and I like the other comic stuff that was not Rob Liefeld. Like with Youngblood, I didn't even get that type of attachment because I felt like the only good character from Youngblood that I liked was Chapel because of the HBO Spawn TV series, which to me, I mean, that kind of made me look at least Chapel like, well, he's a serious threat, he's a badass, and this guy, I mean, I can see why him and Al would be buddies, but I can see why Chapel would be guilty, but Chapel's already a vicious cat from the get-go. So, I don't know, that's what it was. It's like when other people have Liefeld's characters, that's when I started to appreciate him versus like when Liefeld does it himself. Like even Cable, I liked the Cable in the X-Men animated series because, it was different, and when I was a kid, I'm like, I didn't know who made Cable, and I definitely didn't know who made Deadpool because he only appeared in a cameo. But Cable, I'm like, okay, he shows up a lot, and then, it was how can I say, I got introduced to Liefeld's characters through other media versus the direct source. Like with McFarlane and Eric Larson, cartoons, like the Savage Dragon cartoon, which as a kid I had like one action figure, like it was a battle damaged Savage Dragon, and I'd love to get that figure today. I just got to find it for a decent price. If anybody can sell it to me, I'll take it off their hands, in the box, because that was like my favorite figure, because I'm thinking, okay, all right, he's cool. He's like he's like the Incredible Hulk, but he has a fin on his head, but he's a cop, and okay, he has a crappy love life. When I was really starting to read the books after I watched the cartoon, because the cartoon was that weird, like, okay, all right, this is what goes on in the Savage Dragon's world, like, all right, he fights bad guys and puts them in jail. You read a comic book, Basher gets shot in the head by Super Patriot, who wasn't on the cartoon, but I like the fact that, okay, this Captain America cyborg guy, he's a badass, but he never showed up in the show, and I just wish they would have had a full toy line of that instead of stopping where they did with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle toy line. But once again, that's how I got into Savage Dragon. With Spawn, it was like the HBO show, which I wasn't supposed to watch when I was a kid because my uncle would turn it on late at night on HBO, and I'd sneak out there to kind of watch it, or he would have it on TV, but wouldn't care if I watched it or not. But I don't know, with Spawn, I feel like the 97 movie didn't really make me jump up for joy. Like, oh, they did Spawn right. It was more like, the HBO show did it better. And then when I read the comics, like, okay, McFarlane's really, these days in hindsight, it's like he's going real Jim Starlin, with the cosmic stuff and the metaphysical musings of like heaven and hell, and the way McFarlane drew the monsters and drew the demons and drew Spawn, just his overall look before he had way too many spikes. Which I don't know, that's the thing. It's like I gotten all these characters for the Image characters for different avenues versus like, well, I read the comic. I'm like, well, I read the comic a little bit later because back in 2008 when there was a comic shop in my town, I was buying everything. But yeah, that's I know that's a little tangent about my Image stuff. Even with Wildcats with that cartoon, the cartoon wasn't that good. Now that I watch it, but back then, like, oh, who are all these people, right? But I kind of wish that Bruce Timm could have done that cartoon versus what they did do. Even though these days I feel like, well, they're doing everything as a DC animated movie. Why not do DC animated universe Wildcats? I know that depends if Jim Lee wants to do it or not.
I'm not sure if he's got much of a say in that, to be honest with you. Lately, the more I look at how Wildstorm's been treated at DC, I think that maybe, I don't know if the creators still get a piece of it or what, but it seems like they go out of their way to not exploit those characters in any fact. Were they even in the Flashpoint Paradox, or was that all DC characters?
They had like Grifter in there, but I didn't see anybody else like Ladytron or forgot his name.
Majestic?
Yeah. There was also, Majestrix, and they didn't have none of those guys or gals. I mean, they didn't have Zealot. Zealot came later, but Rob Liefeld did that in the issue of Deathstroke. And that was I never picked it up, but I watched video reviews of it on YouTube by a guy, Last Angry Geek, who was like on that guy with glasses. And also I used to watch Lynn Carr make fun of Liefeld stuff. So for me, it was all like, well, okay, these guys are just having a ball with making fun of this guy. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, Liefeld drawing Slade, who I remember from the cartoon of Teen Titans. Yeah, that's another thing. It all comes back to cartoons with me because of all this stuff. It's strange how I'm into comics mostly because of the cartoons. But with the Wildstorm stuff, I do agree. They're treating them dirty. I mean, they already cut off like Warren Ellis's The Wildstorm. I was reading a lot of that because it got me excited again because I hadn't seen those characters in a long time. And I will admit their 90s stuff did get better, and they had like, once again, Alan Moore writing for him and Warren Ellis doing Stormwatch, which I got both volumes of that in trade. And I've been rereading it a lot lately because it feels very prescient. How, well, if DC's going to do like their own edgy superheroes, they should have just done Stormwatch. You wouldn't have to use Batman or Superman or whatever. You can use Midnighter and Apollo and Jenny Sparks and all those characters.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. With Wildstorm, it felt like when it was with DC, it felt all right when it was in its own universe and not crossing over with too many DC characters. Like Midnighter, I don't mind Midnighter flirting with Dick Grayson because I felt like, well, that's interesting. Somebody else thinks he's hot besides Starfire. And to me, I look at it, I'm like, okay, that's cool. He's Batman, but he ain't really Batman. He's like Batman who just fucks some people up. And brutally, and he does it in such a way where it's like, well, damn, I'm not making fun of that guy. And at the same time, I don't want to piss him off. But him and Apollo, they got their thing, and I like those two. Those are really good characters. I mean, I'm just speaking personally because I'm non-binary and everything. So I look at them and go, yeah, that's a great couple. I would like to see more comic books of these two versus like, well, that one little series they did do with who was it, Steve Orlando, and I did read some of it, and I was also kind of going like, I know the Wildstorm did their own version of it, and I wish we got to see more of that world. I mean, I'm surprised it's not adapted in like, I don't know, CW stuff or HBO Max or whatever, because the Wildstorm stuff I look at, it's Marvel Comics but with like the ancient aliens sprinkled in and advanced alien technologies, and their Superman is very brutal, but at the same time he knows Zilla, who's like their version of Wonder Woman, because I see a lot of parallels with the Wildstorm characters. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what it is. I mean, I can't say if I was running things, I'd be like, yeah, let's do more Wildstorm characters because they're more interesting and you can almost do more weird adventurous stuff with them versus, well, we're going to do reboot on Superman with no identity now. And, Wally West is now fused with Dr. Manhattan, and that makes no sense. I mean, I know.
Yeah, I was one of the reasons why I was excited for the New 52 when it was first coming out is I really wanted to see what would happen when you integrated the Wildstorm characters into the DC universe. For the exact reason that you said, they had this great pedigree of awesome writers. That's what set Wildstorm apart. It's one of the reasons why Image was so dependent on Wildstorm in the late 90s because they had the best universe, the sub-universe. They really had a good continuity and great creators, art and story, but the important thing to me was the stories. And, Warren Ellis and Alan Moore and James Robinson and Steven Seagal and just a murderer's row of great talent up until DC bought them. Yeah, and then DC bought them and gutted them, and all the talent left, and nobody wanted to deal with being henpecked by Paul Levitz. I often attack Dan Didio, but Paul Levitz has his own crimes that he committed against creativity. And then once Wildstorm wasn't pulling their weight on their own, it seemed like DC didn't want to fool with them anymore. It felt like they bought Wildstorm to have Jim Lee, and the rest of it sort of got cast aside over the next few years. Wildstorm, which had a much more devoted following, felt like it went the way of Malibu, where they just stopped using any of those characters, even though the company bought them. And I know with Malibu, a big part of it is that the creators do have a piece of those characters. They have to pay those creators for the use of those characters. I assume that some kind of deal like that must be in place for the Wildstorm characters, because otherwise, why wouldn't you exploit those characters? They just used them during the New 52, then they just dropped it. And I can't believe that nobody anywhere at DC doesn't want to have something to do with the Wildstorm universe and those characters and doesn't want to tap that.
I'm like this. Why don't they just let Bruce Timm and them do something with them animated? I feel like not all those characters, like for right now, like what they're doing all these DC original movies or whatever, or even with like, like I said, with even a DC Universe app, like they could easily make shorts of all these characters or make a series like they did with Young Justice. I mean, I look at the Wildstorm characters as they were as written by Warren Ellis and all of them. You have great story potential, right? I mean, that's even with Malibu, which is another one. Which there's certain characters I like from that, like Mantra, the warrior who was he was always in male bodies, but after that got cut off, he was stuck in this this woman's body, and that's a story that I mean, if Marvel didn't screw around with that, I feel like today that you could still have more potential with it. You could get like a good writer, and they can actually add a different, brand new perspective to it. And with Wildstorm, it's the same thing. I feel the same way, where it's like, I mean, Ladytron, like who's like based like robotic tank girl. I like her character because I would say she's broken, but she's she's lived a life. She's stole. She was a bank robber. She got in the shootout. The scientist brought her back from the dead. It's almost like the reverse of RoboCop, but it's like well, what if the person we brought back in the RoboCop project was an asshole? But it also sounded like Laura Petty, because in my head that's kind of how I want to read the character a little bit. Like, yeah, Laura Petty, she was Tank Girl. So also Livewire, DCAU connection. So I feel like with even Mr. Majestic, you could easily have Bruce Timm and them do like a Mr. Majestic short, or do their own version like Justice League Unlimited, just with Wildstorm characters like Stormwatch Unlimited. They could do it, because I've been rewatching all those shows lately, and I go like, you could easily put Wildstorm characters in here.
I like your style, Batman. A pity we never teamed up when the world still existed.
Batman and Grifter, the boy idiot.
Like last night, it struck me again, like, okay, they got faux Black Lightning. They don't got real Black Lightning. They got faux Black Lightning, who is faux Black Vulcan again, because once again, Bruce Timm and they were trying to be smart about like, well, we do have Black Lightning's villain, who's also merged with like Huntress's villain. Trying to think, his name was Stephen Mandragora, even though he was supposed to be Tobias Whale. And if you look at the character and you do a little cross-referencing, okay, this is Tobias Whale, but with hair, but voiced by Glenn Shandex, who was like on Demolition Man and other stuff, and Beetlejuice, the big heavyset guy.
Okay.
And I did a little digging on that because I always find it kind of interesting on that episode, because at the time when I watched it, I'm like, you had the Question and Black Canary and Huntress, doing the crossbow killer hunter thing, That part made me laugh in the movie, like, oh, the crossbow killer, I'm the Huntress, bitch.
Well, you just reminded me too, we never did talk about Birds of Prey. Did you want to go off on that real quick?
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, I'm sure that was fresh in my mind right there. Okay, do you want me to start, or do you want to start?
I've never seen it, so it's all on you for this one.
Okay, should I do spoilers?
Oh, go for it.
Okay, all right. Birds of Prey, the Emancipation of Harley Quinn. Let's just say it's a breakup movie, and all I can tell you about it from my perspective is, okay, the way she breaks up with him. I don't know if he was in that chemical factory or not, but it did piss off Black Mask. And my thoughts on it is, I like that Harley Quinn in this isn't like, she's moved past what she was introduced by in Suicide Squad. And that's a movie I don't like too much at all. The only reason I did like it was because of her in it, and everyone else kind of sucked. In the director, I'm not even going to get into David Ayer, but Harley Quinn they did do wasn't even like the Jimmy Palmiotti or even the Bruce Timm Paul Dini one. It was just this weird, like, she could have been Krayshawn, like the singer Krayshawn, which that's kind of mostly what she reminded me of. But for the movie, she started to resemble more the Harley Quinn of the Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Connor. Yeah, Amanda Connor run, which I like that part with her roller derbying, and then she pissed those girls off, hit one of them in the nose. I mean, that part made me laugh when she was running through the street trying to get away from Renee Montoya. And I'd say that part made me laugh because it made me think of the cartoon, like if this was, once again, if Bruce Timm and them animated it, this is how it would have went down. Like, the Joker broke up with me, but I just drove a gas truck into her little humble abode, Ace Chemical Factory. And then Renee Montoya being on the case. I like that she's an older woman that's played by Rosie Perez. I really like her. She's great. I mean, White Men Can't Jump and Do the Right Thing by Mookie Mookie Mookie. I liked her. She was playing it like an 80s cop. And once again, I thought about the cartoon because that's the version that I'm most familiar with. And the Greg Rucka, the Greg Rucka version, pre-New 52, post-Crisis, where later on she would become the Question. And when I was watching, I'm like, okay, all right. So this is Renee right now, like Gotham Central. Like, okay, see, we're going after Roman Sionis, a.k.a. Black Mask. And I got evidence, and I got contacted inside to go get him. And, the chief of police or whoever, played by Creighton Duke from Friday the 13th. Trying to think what that one. It was the one where he was hunting Jason, that guy. Everybody's just getting in Renee Montoya's way, which I'm like, that's very sexist. I mean, she's a top detective. She's out here trying to solve a case, the rest of y'all over here just want to let her do the work and then snatch glory from it. Where she's like, no, I'm busting my ass trying to get this guy who's like the brand new mafia don of Gotham. And I like how she was just like, okay, very straightforward. She's a straight shooter, like in the cartoon, except the only thing missing I thought from the movie was Harvey Bullock. Because once again on the cartoon, I associate those two as like they both had to work together. Like she was a beat cop, later graduated up to detective. And if I don't think about Batman, No Man's Land, and all that stuff going on, and the Nightfall stuff, which in the comics she was involved with, but she was more like a supporting character than just her own. Like we see her adventures through her eyes and stuff like that before she became the Question. She was always just a straight shooter. Even with Gordon, who was like she's like one of the top cops that Gordon would trust. And I don't know. Once again, it reels back to the cartoon where I'm like, I wish she would have had more spotlight there, but it only had like 4 seasons, and if anything, she was more of a background character. And I liked that she was a lesbian, and her relationship with her girlfriend who was like the DA. But a lot of it was like, I felt like it at least did the Greg Rucka stuff well, like with her being a lesbian, being a cop, and then later on, just after being fired from being a cop, going off to be her own vigilante or detective, whatever. I mean, I don't know if they're going to make her the Question in the next movie, but I like to see it. I'm open to the idea because I'd read Greg Rucka's Question pipeline like about 50 times because I was on a real Batwoman Question kick before the New 52 hit because I really like what they did with this character. She's evolved past from, well, Paul Dini and Bruce Timm made her up, but she had a life just like Harley did beyond the cartoon. And it's neat to see her in a movie, even though she wasn't in the Dark Knight movies by Christopher Nolan. But they did have 2 characters like that were not Montoya and Bullock, like Warts and Ramirez. They always have a heavyset cop I see in those old Batman movies and go, hey, that could have been Detective Bullock because he did come out in the 70s. So once again, another character who was a lot older before I seen him on Batman the Animated Series. And the Huntress, on the other hand, I felt like she was like this weird little like Riot Girl version of like the one I saw in Justice League Unlimited, which that's kind of the vibes I was getting, except she might have been more in line with maybe something else Greg Rucka had done. There was a lot of Greg Rucka I saw in the Huntress too, which goes to show, I mean, that guy can write. I mean, I really love his work. And Black Canary was another one. I'm like, she's not my favorite, but I liked her version in Justice League Unlimited. Now, the Arrowverse version I didn't like too much. Now I know White Canary was on Legends of Tomorrow, and I don't mind her. But the second one, who later on died and was replaced by her Earth 2 counterpart, I like that actress, but, once again, like Cisco had to make her a device on the Arrowverse to do the Sonic Scream. I like Jessie Smollett Bell, and I like I like the actress they got playing her in the movie because she was a singer, and it looked like they took little bits from the post-Crisis and maybe bits from like the New 52, except instead of being like in a punk band, she was more like a lounge singer, which they didn't add in a whole Team 7 part, which I find that still kind of dubious to this day, thinking in my mind, in my head, kind of like, okay, why would her, Amanda Waller, and Slade be on the same team with Grifter and Lynch, which to me never made any sense. You know what I'm saying?
I never could, like, trying to turn her into like a covert ops type person, it just never seemed to work for me with that character. I mean,
me neither.
I think about her being the cop's daughter, or I think about her being the second generation heroine. When you try to get her part of, Team 7 or whatever it was, that's trying to make it something that doesn't belong.
In my brain, it's like, okay, why Amanda Waller knows who you are, so she can put a bomb in your neck and have you in the Suicide Squad at any time, or call you in to do a favor. Slade, on the other hand, well, if he knows you, he might back off, or he might not. Grifter, on the other hand, was a weird one, which I don't know if he's still in the current DC universe or not.
I don't think
But
any of those characters are in there anymore. It seemed like within a couple of years of the New 52, they all disappeared. Because we talked earlier about Wildcats. I was really looking forward to that Wildcats book because I love Ramon Villalobos' artwork.
Oh yeah, shout out on Twitter. That guy's awesome.
Yeah, and I got he was in town last year, and I got 2 pieces from him. I got him to do one of my original characters, and I got him to do one of the members of the Hyper Clan from JLA.
From Grant Morrison.
Yeah.
From Grant Morrison, JOA. Yeah.
Yeah, he did Protex. He did Protex, the leader, and he went in there. The guy they were working with apparently got the artist in his stable to start using a lot of Zipatone, and so he employed that for the artwork. It is gorgeous. I need to get it out there, but I've neglected my Idlehead of Diablo block for so long that when I want to try to build it up and then put that out there, I don't want to just put it out there cold and because it deserves to be seen. But yeah, that was going to be so awesome, and then it just doesn't happen. And then there's not really much in the way of word of why it didn't happen. It just is gone.
And to this day, when I got the news, it pissed me off. But like I was saying about Birds of Prey, it's like I could see a mishmash of Batman, DCAU, and a little bit of whatever New 52 / Rebirth stuff with like all the characters out. Design wise, to me, they look like themselves. I mean, Harley looks like the Amanda Conner, Jamie Palmiotti version, so I have no beef with her. Black Canary, I'm like, well, I could possibly see her version being like the New 52 one, but played by a black actress instead of a white actress, which to me I felt like that's all cool. I mean, I'm like, well, as long as you do that, that's fine. I mean, it doesn't matter like her origin, long as because Renee Montoya mentioned, well, your mother wouldn't want you working for a Roman Sionist, right? And because that made me think, well, Renee must know her mother from way back then. And they don't do any mention of Batman or anything, but Harley does name one of her name her one hyena Bruce. So I'm thinking, does she know who Batman is, or is that just a random nickname? I'm thinking it's a little nod and a wink of, I'm gonna name him Bruce because we killed Robin one time, me and Mr. J. But, let me think what else. And Cassandra Cain, she's another one where I'm like, the movie version, I do got some familiarity with her post-crisis, No Man's Land, having her own series from like the late 90s to like the aughts version of Cassandra Cain, where she didn't say anything, but she was like a really good fighter, daughter of Lady Shiva and, the assassin David Kane, who's running around in No Man's Land working for Lex Luthor, and, one of Batman's many teachers who taught him how to, how Batman to be the best it is what he does. And Cassandra Cain in the movie, I get making her like a street orphan pickpocket would work for people who don't know the character, but knowing what I do know about the character, I know she didn't say much in the movie, which I'm guessing that's more of a wink and a nod of like, well, this is almost the Cassandra Cain you know about. But she's like she almost reminds me of a hit girl, just being like a, trash talking, cursing, smart ass, teenage kid who, she's in a rough spot, she can handle herself. Where her in the comic book, she could fight, she outfought Batman, which I kind of wish, once again, another character who should have been in the DCAU, but then that would mean you have to do Batman's No Man's Land also as a story arc, which they would have never did, even in Justice League. They could have never, I don't know if they would have ever done it or not, but I would like to entertain the idea of like, well, Bruce Timm, why didn't you guys do that? You could have also crippled Barbara Gordon in that, but make it in a way. But then I got to think Batman Beyond, where Barbara Gordon's walking around and she's commissioner. I don't know. DCAU almost seemed to had zigged where the DC post-crisis universe zagged, and then the New 52 corrected. And I liked it Batgirl Burnside, but I kind of missed it Oracle, who was like the real founder of Birds of Prey. But I don't know. Like I said, I'm aware of those characters and even the stuff that Gail Simone had did. But I'd seen those characters like in other books, independent of the Bat family. Like even Huntress, she was in the JOA with Grant Morrison and them. And also when I was watching the movie, I had little vibes of that a little bit. Like, well, she was just killing, But I'm thinking, well, if Batman was there, she'd be like, well, no killing. Or the Question was there, you try to help her out in a tough spot. But I don't know if we're ever going to get that version of the Question of the Question meeting this version of Huntress in a future movie. So my mind was racing when I was watching this, and I liked that fact that Black Mask was he was gay, him and Victor Zsasz, but I felt like at least from what I watched with Black Mask in the movie called Under the Red Hood, the animated movie with Jason Todd, and it was an adaptation of Judd Winnick's story. Now on there he was just like a complete eccentric psychopath a little bit. Like he had a skull mask on, but he was just like, telling jokes every 5 minutes almost. Between him and the Joker, they're just vicious madmen. But in the movie, they made it, Ewan McGregor kind of did him as this, I don't know, he felt like a character from a different movie. And Victor Zsasz did a little bit too, even though Zsasz was also in Batman Begins, I remember. But there was just a bald-headed, thug-looking guy who kind of wandered in and around the background. He was in a court scene when Bruce made it back to Gotham in that movie. And then he was also in Gotham, which once again, they made him a bald guy, but, played by a different actor, who I think was the guy that was in from X-Men Apocalypse. You might know who I'm talking about. But not I think the guy that played Caliban. I don't know. I just saw Birds of Prey and went I know who all these characters are, even from looking at DC's Who's Who. But then 4 or 5 different versions of them I've seen from other media start conflicting with me just watching the movie as a movie. And a little bit DCAU Black Canary fights a little bit more jujitsu a little bit, and a little bit more Shadow Khan, and she was a bit more fast and lighter on her feet, where, Huntress did about the same thing. She didn't use her crossbow as much. She used a bow staff. And Harley Quinn's just Harley Quinn, so I know how she fights. I'm going on a tangent, but the thing is, I like the movie as far as the story goes. I like where it was heading, kind of as an origin story for the group. Even though I was waiting for a Barbara Gordon reference, which never came. And it was more much it's like Deadpool 2. We got the X-Force, but only Domino was the most interesting one. Everybody else done died. Shatterstar, you're dead. Bedlam, gone. The Vanisher, up in electrical lines, we don't need him. But I feel like at least with the Harley Quinn movie, Birds of Prey, they didn't kill too many characters, except for spoilers. Black Mask, he had a grenade, sleight of hand stuck in his pocket and got kicked off the pier at Founders Pier in Gotham, and he blew up, which we're not going to see him again. And also Victor Zsasz died when Huntress hit him in the neck with a crossbow. I don't know, the movie, I'm of two minds. I enjoyed it as a movie, and I like it. They didn't try to do at least what I expected from all the characters, at least the ones with the names like Renee Montoya and Huntress and all them. At least by the end, Huntress looked like Huntress a little bit. She had her mask on and something that kind of resembled her New 52 costume and a little bit of her post-crisis costume, but it still looked more like a jacket, and I wouldn't say combat pants, more like capri pants. They were black, but she wore this hood, this shiny hood thing throughout the whole movie. I don't know. That's the thing. The costumes weren't bad, but I could see what they were doing, but they weren't trying to do more like the MCU. Give you the costumes, no matter how ridiculous they may look. Like Captain America or Doctor Strange and characters like that.
Yeah,
I don't know what you think.
that's one of the issues I've had with the DC EU is that they are still ashamed about being superhero movies, and that's sort of a drag. I wish they could just go whole hog and be into that.
That's kind of what I want. I want it to be like the DC AU and the MCU. Okay, this is Huntress. She wears purple and black. Go. Black Canary. Fishnets and blue. I mean, she already has blonde hair. You could do that, but it was more like just her valet. In the movie, it was she wore a yellow and blue type, crop top or something like that, and some dark blue pants. So I don't know, it was an interesting look, but a little more like her, what she would wear in her civilian garb than as a superhero costume.
And the funny thing, the one thing you could do with Harley Quinn being in the Birds of Prey is by her being as wild and vivacious and colorful as she is, that would allow for a character like Huntress to bring the purple in. That would allow for Black Canary. Well, actually, she's got a pretty straightforward costume anyway, so she doesn't have to get too crazy. I know. But it would give a license to other characters to be more flamboyant because nobody's going to out peacock Harley Quinn, and instead they played everything trying to street level and if anything toned down Harley Quinn, which is the wrong direction to go for a character like that.
For Harley, to me, it's always what she looked like in the cartoon. You see her flip around with that on, you go okay, I know who she is, and I know who her pudding is, but at the same time, when you make her dress down a little bit, she just looks like any old body on the street, even though she's the most notorious woman in Gotham. Her boyfriend is the most notorious man in Gotham. I'm thinking, no, the cops should arrest you on sight, Harley Quinn. I mean, no one in Renee Montoya. I'm I give her props. I'm going to arrest you. I don't care that you broke up with the Joker. You're going downtown.
Yeah, if you're trying to keep a low profile, you don't have facial tattoos, because I don't even have to know what you look like. If I know what the tattoo on your face is supposed to be, I can pretty well guess. Oh, you must be the infamous Harley Quinn. So yeah.
Yeah, your boyfriend is that clown downtown who keeps fighting the Batman every night, and you about give Commissioner Gordon a heart attack. You kidnapped him last week. You do remember that, right? And I look at her and go, "You just remind me of the rapper Kreayshawn or Little Debbie, or I don't know if you ever listen to their music."
I'm an old, so no. Although I think I remember Kreayshawn from a few years back, if I remember correctly.
It was Gucci, Prada.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's
one big room full of bad bitches. I mean, I used to bop that all the time with my headphones on. I'm like, this is a Harley Quinn song. Why ain't this in Suicide Squad? This fits her. He's the virgin you're going with, right, in the movies, because I'm thinking her and Kreayshawn and Little Debbie and V Nasty. I mean, that's a girl game.
They were too busy pumping out that Rolling Stones and Aerosmith, that contemporary music.
Oh, trying to be Scorsese a little bit. And Eminem. They had Eminem in there. They're trying to get like the Hot Topic crowd.
But I derailed you on Black Lightning, so do you want to circle back to that one? Or do you?
Oh, yeah, let's circle back to that. I'm sorry. I mean, I've watched this movie like at least 10 times already, so I'm like, even with the special features on, so it's very fresh in my mind. I even bought like one of those Birds of Prey Giant Size #1 comics. I bought one of those recently.
I'm waiting for it to be free. It's still, I think you have to either buy it or you have to have an elevated rental. It's like, no, I'll wait for cable. I'll catch it for free.
No, I plan on getting a trade of like the Gail Simone Birds of Prey. I really don't want to get Chuck Dixon's.
Yeah,
I really don't like him right now.
He's been a right wing guy for a while, so that's not a new development. Oops, sorry.
Should I feel less guilty if I buy it off Amazon?
Yeah. Hold on, I screwed something up. Give me a sec. Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Hey, I can hear you.
Okay.
You're good.
Yeah, I was tweaking something with my headphones and messed something up. Okay. So for me, I thought that Chuck Dixon was a good writer back in the 90s. I thought he was particularly good at writing the Batman character. His politics and mine are not the same, obviously.
Not mine either.
And he became more vocal about that as time went by. He's another one of those guys whose blog kind of got him in trouble. I never liked how he wrote Nightwing, and because Nightwing's my favorite member of the Bat family.
Oh, he's mine too. Mine too. The Batman animated series.
It's very frustrating to spend years waiting on a Nightwing series and then to finally get it and then not to read it because you don't like how the character's being written and how out of character he's being written. And same thing with the Birds of Prey. I checked out the early miniseries they did, and I enjoyed them for the artwork. The stories really didn't do much for me. And so when they started the ongoing, I'd pick it up now and again, usually when there'd be something related to like a solo Oracle story or a Nightwing guest appearance, stuff like that. And I'd read the issue and it'd be fine, but it was never anything there that made me want to stick with it. And then Gail Simone came on, and I loved her column on, she did, which one was the name of her column? Shoot. You'll All Be Sorry.
Refrigerators, I know about that one.
Yeah, so Women in Refrigerators gave her the notoriety to get hired as a columnist over at Comic Book Resources, and she started a humor column called You'll All Be Sorry, which was hilarious. And then she started doing some writing for Marvel, and then she moved over to DC. And I wasn't willing to read her writing Deadpool and stuff, but when she was going to start writing Birds of Prey, and especially because they were adding Huntress, who's probably like my second favorite Batman family character, I figured I'd go ahead.
Justice League Unlimited.
Yeah, I figured I'd give it a try. I did. I thought it was great, and I ended up collecting the entire Simone run, and it was one of the only comic books for a while there that DC was putting out that I was actually still buying on a monthly basis. Now, by the end of the run, I was kind of over it. It just kind of had lost its spark. But the first several trades up through about, I guess, issues like the late 80s or 90s, early 90s, it's really good stuff. The stuff with Ed Bennis and the stuff with, what's the other fellow's name? And I even liked him better. The art was really great. The characterization was great. The chemistry between the leads was awesome. That's when
they're introduced before Blackest Night and all that stuff, because when it was coming out, it was one of those comics where I saw when I was getting on Twitter, there was a lot of chatter about, Gail Simone, she written Birds of Prey, and at the time, also another thing in my mind about that TV show that I would say the WB/currently CW, I got that on DVD. I'm going to sit up here and say it now. I got it on DVD. I mostly got for the Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy Gotham Girl shorts. It's a show, once again, that made me think, okay, Barbara Gordon's in a wheelchair, Batman disappeared, and, Helena Wayne is busy, at a bar with metahumans and stuff. I mean, that show's like another version of the Birds of Prey that I'm aware of, and not to say I didn't like the show, but at the time, it was like Black Canary was being portrayed as a younger character, which once again, in animation, she's being portrayed a little bit older older, and since this predates the Arrowverse, I'm thinking, okay, has there ever been like a consistent version of Black Canary,
Yeah.
And I know that she was the inspiration for Silk Spectre and for Watchmen, with Laurie.
Partially, a lot of it was Nightshade from Charlton as well, but they borrowed from the very fairly recent versions of Black Canary there as well. I tried watching the Birds of Prey TV show when it was first coming on the air. I watched the pilot and I realized that it wasn't really my cuppa, and I think that was still when Chuck Dixon was doing it, so there wasn't enough there for me to be into it. And I can't wait for you to check out Mia Sara as Harley Quinn on that show, because she's going to be unrecognizable.
If you're looking for your paycheck, forget it. I don't reward failure.
Excuse me, beautiful. I did my job. I got in the truck. You didn't say anything about cops.
I asked you to hijack one armored truck, a job you assured me you could do in your sleep. You got caught. People who work for Harley Quinn don't get caught.
Oh, calm down, baby. Nobody has to lose any body parts here.
Don't be so sure.
I'd say like the mid to late 2000s, like 2008, 2009, when I really just gave into the beast and was like, screw it, I'm buying Image books, DC books, Marvel books, and stuff that I've never heard of. Thrill me. That's what my collection is back there most. And I got like one issue that he did of Adventures of Superman where Tom Grummett was drawing, and I think he inked a Tom Grummett section where Jonathan Kent was dead and Superman's spirit was in the afterlife.
The infamous Adventures of Superman 500 with the white.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. I got it without being in the bag though, because I had a used version. I got a used copy of it from a friend of mine. I was like, hey, I heard you like comic books. Here's a Superman, here's a Gambit, and here's an X-Men issue of Gambit who first appeared. The Gambit issue is in plastic, so I'm not letting that one out.
Was it like me where he peeled off the enhanced cover and it wasn't anything worth a dang to be bothering with?
I got the newsstand one. That's the one I got.
But I remember correctly, that was Jerry Ordway's last issue writing the book, and that's probably why he inked that one.
And that's where Steel debuted without being Steel yet.
Right. When he comes out of the debris.
Yeah, he comes out of there, he's holding a hammer, looking badass. I'm thinking Shaq is never going to play this character. He's going to be voiced by Worf. That's going to be cool. Eradicator shows up by Roger Stern and Jackson Guice, who I think when I was young I couldn't pronounce his name right. I just knew that guy is. I knew Roger Stern's a weird one. I didn't even think he created a Hobgoblin, which I got like a little action figure of that too, because once again going back to cartoons, that's strange with this. See, I grew up in an era where we see everything in animation first, and I was totally unaware of those comic books till real late. So I feel like the stuff I'm bathing in now, I've seen it all animated, thinking they're never going to make movies of none of this. And what movies they did make, they're not going to make anymore. If only I can go back and tell my 10-year-old self that. No, my 13-year-old self that.
Well, I mean, again, when I was a kid, only the losers would have comic books in the classrooms and stuff like that. I'd wear I was one of those guys, I would just wear my freak flag proudly. But I was one of the only guys who'd be wearing a superhero. You could wear Batman stuff and you'd be okay. Anything besides Batman stuff and you were a nerd, just simple as that.
I mean, now I got a pile I got like 2 or 3 Deadpool shirts. I need to get another Batman shirt. I got like a Harley Quinn shirt, a Joker shirt, like two Superman shirts.
You can't walk into a single classroom without seeing a kid with superhero, not just a kid. You're going to see multiple kids with something superhero related. And it's so dominating the media now, in part because so much stuff has gone to TV, so much stuff has gone to streaming. That one of the only spectacles that is reserved for motion pictures these days are the big superhero fests.
Right. So, in the 2000s, I mean, I think late 90s, because I remember Batman and Robin, it came out and that tanked. And I think when I was like a little kid, I'd seen Batman Forever. And I think that's the movie that kind of made me excited at the time, but even I was laughing there because I didn't know any better, because I seen the one on the cartoon and like, oh, hey, it's Riddler acting funny. And it's Ace Ventura. And oh, look, it's Tommy Lee Jones, not saying he doesn't care. This Chris O'Donnell guy, he ain't that bad of a Robin. Because I was young and I didn't know any better, because I mean, at the time I didn't know how spoiled I was with the cartoon being as good as it was. Or I'm like, the cartoon version is more serious than this movie. I know, me and my brother, we had like one Batman action figure, remember? I think we had like 2. Like the animated series Burger King or McDonald's one. And, had like the limited articulation. But he looked like the cartoon, because that's all that mattered to me. Because I also later on had Superman animated series one from Burger King that looked like cartoon. And I think I had like one George Clooney Batman, but it was like hockey themed snap-on clip armor. It was made by Kenner, so you know how Kenner did it, or limited articulation. And my brother had Robin. And I think I used to get his Robin and play with my Batman with it. Even though John Leguizamo was great in the movie. But in the animated series, he was a little... That was not John Leguizamo if they would have really let him let loose. He was in another movie I watched with Patrick Swayze and Wesley Snipes and, you know, Tu Wong Fu.
Oh, Tu Wong Fu. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I think I'd seen that when I was young, and I was almost blown away by it. I'm like, am I looking at this right? Because I didn't know what drag was. I mean, I don't know, that's strange, isn't it? Because back then, I'm like, okay, they're going to a drag ballroom thing. I didn't know what that. I don't know. I'm a young kid. I didn't know what none of this was. I'm like, well, there's Dirty Dancing. There's Simon Phoenix.
Yeah, Simon Phoenix. There you go.
And then there's the Pest right there, and I'm like, I kind of liked him a little bit. I kind of liked them all because I'm like, I'd never seen these actors do this sort of thing, you know.
Well, see, with John Leguizamo, he would often play women during a stand-up act.
I've seen a little bit of those.
Yeah. But for Wesley Snipes and Patrick Swayze to do drag, that was a significant moment for cinema.
To me, that was a bit strange because you know later he's so aggro. You know, he's Blade. He's Simon Phoenix. You know, he's Passenger 57.
Right.
Or Dirty Dancing. I'm like, I kind of see it. You know what I mean?
Well, he did a ton of action stuff too. You know, he Roadhouse and Steel Dawn and Point Break, Next to Kin.
Yeah, no, Point Break. Another. You know, with Johnny Utah. Keanu before he became the Keanu we all know and love. I mean, that's the thing. I don't know what it was. I mean, young me was like, I shouldn't be crushing on these people, but I am. But it was like because my uncle had HBO, so we about saw things we probably shouldn't have saw.
So say we all. Yeah. So tell me something then. Okay, you were talking about a lot of the childhood characters. When did you start encountering non-binary characters, and did any of those early ones resonate with you?
Non-binary isn't recently, or
no? I'm talking about back in the day.
Oh, back then I probably wouldn't know what that would be. I just knew there was some characters who weren't quite women and weren't quite men. They were like, it was like Prince, where you looked at them and they had like the traits of both, and you can never pinpoint and say that, well, that guy's a woman, or didn't mean to misgender anything. That person's a woman or this person's a man, and you're always in the middle. And I don't know, for some reason, I guess I saw that stuff along, like when I was talking about Tu Wong Fu, I didn't think that, you know, people would do that. You know, I didn't know. And I think there was also always shape-shifting characters and stuff like Xena the Warrior Princess, or, you know, or characters like Morph on X-Men who were changing to women sometimes. It's, you know what I'm saying? Like, at least in fiction, or heaven forbid Clayface turning into a woman. Batman animated series, because I'm like, okay, he's a dude, right? But now he's a lady, I guess, for subterfuge, isn't it? But, you know, I mean, I think I've seen stuff like Freaky Friday and stuff like that. You know, it was always like people who transform from one state to another. There was never like full on, like, well, they're right here in the middle. I think there was one character in a comic called Blood Syndicate who was like a metamorph.
Okay, yeah.
It looked like a dude, but was a woman.
Well,
so
Milestone was really good about, you know, they definitely went places nobody else was going back then.
I think I saw that one time, and I didn't think too much of it, because I'm thinking, okay, you know, hey, it's a fictional character, but at the same time, well, this character is trying not to be the thing that society wants it to be, you know. And I think even Martian Manhunter changed into women in time, so I'm like, well, he presents himself as male, but he can also be female. So I guess it was always characters who could transform into different types of people. So
it's weird with John Jones because you can see the society changing, because Peter David wrote a 2-issue arc where gender fluidity was something that freaked John Jones out in a pretty big way, and it's kind of a story point. And then a few years later in JLA, there's that one issue, I think, I don't know if it was Mark, huh?
It was the one with Mazo, wasn't it?
Okay, yeah. So I think it was a Mark Miller written issue, and he presents as a Japanese woman. Now, part of it, I think, was to see if he could trick Batman, if I remember correctly, and he couldn't, I think is what it was.
I think in a cartoon he did it like once or twice.
Yeah.
And I know Miss Martian changes from female to male. Oh, that's what it was. It was always characters who could transform that I could think of, and there's a lot of them. I feel like they present themselves as male, but can be female.
Yeah. But it's interesting.
Happens, they're always like an amalgam of both.
Yeah. But it kind of shows you kind of where society is, because, you know, back in the early decades, 50s, 60s, 70s, even 80s, you would never see Martian Manhunter transform into to a woman. I don't remember that ever happening. And you even have that story in the early 90s where he's pointedly having a problem with that. And then just a few years later, he's doing it himself. And, you know, and I know that that's happened a few times. I think Plastic Man may have done it a few times as well. And so it's like, I don't know if it's society or the characters that are evolving, you know, probably a mix of both.
I mean, I think that's why I encountered all that from shapeshifters in fiction. Like, you know, like they wouldn't just turn into a werewolf or a monster. They would just turn into, if they look like a man, they'll turn into a woman. Or in some cases, they'll amalgamate both together, you know, which I don't know, it's kind of hard for me to explain, because even with Danny the Street, when I, you know, was reading about, you know, about that character, it's like, I get this character, he's got both traits, but it's not presenting itself as just this one trait exclusively. I know in the show, Danny's non-binary. I mean, these days you can actually say that, but I know back then I wouldn't. I don't know, back then, I know young as I was, and I didn't know much about sex and gender and all that, you know, I was young, and, you know, older folk ain't gonna tell you this. They always say, they'll say, well, you know, don't do none of that gay shit, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, they always give you the negative. They never tell you about, well, all right, fine. If love is so unconditional, then why is this one little thing giving you a problem with me, right?
Yeah.
And I guess in fiction, I look at, like, if you could turn into a woman, you turn into a woman. If you could turn into a man, you turn into a man. If you can amalgamate the two, you can do that too, you know? I mean, it's just a strange thing, because I can't think of too many prominent non-binary characters who just exist. I know in recent years they got that, but back then, in the 90s or the early 2000s, I guess they would always flirt with it, but they never would go with it, even with Morph.
Teasing stuff. The one that always got me was Mystique, because for a long time the theory was that she was Nightcrawler's mother, which I think eventually bore out. But the original plan was she was actually going to be Nightcrawler's father, and that Destiny was going to be the mother.
I see that. That's back when I didn't know much about Mystique till I started reading and seeing her in the comics, because in the show she would change into guys all the time. So, you know, back then when I was a kid, I'm like, well, I know she's related to, I know since she looks like a woman, okay, she's Nightcrawler's mother, because you're thinking as a kid, you know, you're thinking more to that, and all of a sudden I'm seeing guidance counselors and stuff, and, you know, because my mom was like that.
But it seems to me like if Mystique could conceive a child as a man, then that was probably her original state. So Mystique is presented as female this entire time, and everybody takes it for granted. But one would assume that probably wasn't the original state. So in that regard, Mystique is probably one of the most accepted characters that would have that level of fluidity.
I think that's probably why I like her, at least when she was in the X-Men movies, because when they killed Senator Kelly, she was Senator Kelly for a long while. She wasn't Mrs. Kelly as a strange wife or anything, like she was Senator Kelly, which, and I mean, I can look at her now as a non-binary character for sure, because she's in a queer relationship, which now is a subtext. It's, you know, it's full-on text, you know, whereas than before, you know, you had her own Wolverine, and she was in love with him, and she was in love with Sabretooth, and
I hated that.
Yeah, which to me it still doesn't make sense today, because I got the cartoon version stuck in my head. These two would never hook up.
No,
and then I look at the movie version and go, these two would never hook up.
They would never hook up outside of bad 90s comics, and that's the time when they would have been revealed. So I think that came up in the Sabretooth miniseries that Mark Texeira drew, and it's like, no, that never made sense to me.
Well, for one, I'm like, what does she see in him, and what does he see in her? And also, you know, these two both don't like Wolverine. And Wolverine probably, I don't know, Wolverine and Sabretooth and Mystique, they've all been around the block.
Yeah, by decades, so often, yeah.
So I look at them all and go, like, you all have had sex with each other probably once, probably in the same room, and didn't realize it. You just Wolverine, you just ain't gonna talk about that in front of, you know, Scott and Jean, especially ain't gonna tell Jean that. I know recent X-Men comics he probably would, but back then, no.
So I've still got the material. I'm still planning on using it. I've got to get through this other stuff that's time sensitive before I can work on that. Plus, I still haven't figured out where it's going to go. A lot of it seems like it'd be good for DC Bloodlines, but I haven't done one of those in ages. It might be good for DC Special.
I'm really missing that podcast.
Yeah, and what I probably would need to do if it's going to be a DC Bloodlines is I need to do some Black Lightning reading and kind of put some interstitials in there. And so I know it's going to take a little bit of work to set that up.
Going on from what I was reading from that run too.
Exactly. Yeah. So
I got this whole thing about, like, I think I want to read a complete story. I used to do the issue by issue thing, but, you know, since trades, you know, you can get a lot more with a trade or a hardcover. That's kind of how I do a lot of my reading, because I feel like if I try to go back and get those issues cheap that way, I'm just going to have a stack of bagged and board comics that I know I might read one time and then, you know, put in my box in my collection. So then, you know, they'd be there because I know the 90s.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
You blacked out there for a minute.
Yeah, I'm so sorry about that. But anyway, I felt like I had a premonition because all of late last year, I kept feeling like I needed to go to this one comic shop I really like that's got dollar bins, like tons of dollar bins. It's just really cool. It's got a lot of different weird stuff. And I just like that shop a lot. I like visiting it as a special occasion because most of my books I get through mail order. So I don't have a compulsion to actually go to most regular comic shops, but I like this particular one. And I had this premonition and I kept putting it off because like, look, I don't need to get anything right now. I'll get around to it. The whole COVID hits. And now that I've got a bunch of stuff I'd like to go ahead and pick up out of those bins and just get the chance to get out of the house and explore that place. I'm not going to anytime soon. For all I know, they're going to close up before this whole thing's over with. I'm sure a lot of comic shops are going to. So I wish I'd followed up on that premonition, I guess, and gotten over that shop again. So I recognize that urge to just get a big old stack of dollar books and plow into them.
And for me, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, that's why I know Amazon. I mean, it's about the only place where I can buy like trades and everything. I should use DCBS, Discount Comic Book Services, but I bought like, I think 2 Savage Dragon archives from there. And I don't know, I bought that from Amazon. There's another book. It was Frank Cho's Liberty Meadows. That's what I bought from there, and that was like the only book I ever bought from there. But
you can sometimes get some good deals on. I mean, in-stock trades have some deals, and they're basically the same as DCBS. Literally the same company, but they're two separate websites. But they'll have sometimes better deals on backstock stuff at in-stock trades. And then mycomicshop.com also tends to have some pretty good deals.
Okay, I mean, I've been up here just sticking to what I know.
Yeah,
and that's kind of thing. But I should try other places, even though that's the thing with me right now with this whole Wonder Woman reading, because I gotta say it, because like Batman, well, he's clearly Bruce Wayne when he's not Batman, or Superman's Clark Kent when he's not being Superman, and even Martian Manhunter on that show, he didn't have a civilian identity till about like the end of, like near the end of Justice League Unlimited season 2, was it? Like near Destroyer, where he went off after him and Diana talked about like, well, you know what, I can't just be stuck up here in the Watchtower. I need something else to do.
So he becomes an elderly Asian gentleman, which is fine, but it's not a story engine. You don't get new stories out of him being a retiree.
I liked him as a detective.
Yeah, exactly. The detective works, and they've used him well in the Berlanti verse as well with his ties.
Which I like. That's my favorite version of him right there, where he's, you know, he was Hank Henshaw, and now he's just John Jones, Private Eye, you know. Which to me, I'm like, that makes sense, because I know the character I know he was voiced by Carl Lumbly, who was Mantis, and I'd watched that show when I was a kid, and I'm like, okay, I know that guy. I've seen him and stuff. Like, he's a great actor. Because when he did the voice on the cartoon, because I think Carl Lumbly played Martian Manhunter's father on Supergirl. So for me, once again, I'm thinking, oh yeah, cartoon connection again, because I was always looking for that. And you know, him as a detective, as a black detective, I thought that's interesting, because in my head I always thought of him as black and white, you know. In
a group like the Justice League that's so white, you need to find whatever inroads you can for inclusion, and it seems to work well. My favorite live action Martian Manhunter so far is Phil Morris on Smallville. I liked him. Good. Yeah, I liked him as like sort of the space detective, space bounty hunter. And I recently started watching Doom Patrol now that it's on HBO Max, and they've got him playing Cyborg's dad.
Oh yeah. I got that. I got season 1 on DVD. I like that though.
Yeah, I'm still only a few episodes in, so but what I like is that because he's the father of Cyborg, there was always a little bit of resentment that Cyborg replaced Martian Manhunter as a founder in the Justice League in the New 52, which they've mostly walked back at this point. But there's something about having that continuity of having Phil Morris play his dad on that show where it's almost like, okay, I'm okay with it now. You know, there's like this weird tacit connection where it's like a handoff, where it's like a version of John Jones has passed the baton to a version of Cyborg, and for some reason, just like I'm meta cool with it now. It's like, okay, you've sold me on it.
For me, I like it because I seen him on Smallville. I almost couldn't believe that he was Martian Manhunter on that. I'm like, okay, all right, this wasn't how at the time I envisioned him, you know, because I always saw him as green, you know.
Well, and he's such a stiff in the Justice League cartoon. I had trouble with it, and so I liked that he was cool. You know, I mean, he was probably a little too cool. Martian Manhunter probably shouldn't be as cool as Phil Morris was.
To me, I'm like that. That's cool right there.
Yeah, but I think that's a version of Martian Manhunter that would have broader appeal. So I just like Phil Morris. I just enjoy watching him perform anyway. So
he's a great actor. But when he was Cyborg's father, I'm like, I can see why him and the Chief would not get along, because he's trying to tell him, hey, that's my kid over there, and he's like, I could be one of your experiments, and I'm glad you helped, but my wife is dead. Or I'm like, I get it. This is a man who's all struggling. Like, hey, yeah, my son son can hang out over here, but he's not gonna go on one of your crazy missions here now it's colder. And even with Timothy Dalton on there as the chief, that's what really maybe want to reread Doom Patrol again. I'm like, okay, now this is the chief right here. He used to be James Bond, so in another life.
Well, you're never gonna beat Joe Morton for Silas Stone. This is the guy this is Cyberdyne's creator. So of course he'd turn his kid into a cyborg. It totally makes sense.
It does. My son now is a Terminator.
One more micro booster and I could take out a tank.
Now will you tell me?
I told you everything.
Come on, Dad. What was he like? What'd he say?
He was tall.
Oh, jeez. I know what he looks like. Weren't you freaked? He's a killer alien.
He lost his cousin, but then he had the protoplasm Supergirl, who became the Earth Angel Supergirl, who eventually was replaced by the actual Kryptonian Supergirl return.
But Earth Angel Supergirl looked like Supergirl from Superman the Animated Series for a time. For a time, which I thought that was interesting. It almost made me buy that book. I'm like, hey, that's the one cartoon.
And the funny thing is, that's actually when I dropped the book. I really liked Supergirl when they were dealing with supernatural stuff and the duality of her being a merged entity with Lena Danvers. And once they started doing her more like she was in the cartoon, I felt like they didn't really know what to do with Supergirl anymore. So that was actually a jumping off point for me.
I know we're at two different opposite spectrums on that one, because for me, I was watching everything going like, I hope it's like that in the book. And half time coming across like, well, this ain't like it was in the show.
No, true. Well, but see, like all the stuff, the protoplasm Supergirl, I didn't care for either. I didn't become a Supergirl fan really until the Peter David run with the Earth Angel stuff. And then I've come to appreciate a lot of stuff that came before that. And I saw the movie when I was a kid too. So
I've seen that one.
Yeah, and it's a terrible movie, but I still have affection for it. What do you think?
It's a movie I remember going like, I hope that. Because when I heard they were making the show, I'm like, I hope to God they don't do that.
Right, don't do that.
That movie was like a canon film.
Right.
If Superman 4 was a canon film.
Yeah, it's very cheap and very badly conceived and badly written and mostly badly acted.
And a guy from Die Hard who was saying, "Hey, Booby, I'm your white knight." He's trying to make the moves on Supergirl. Ironically enough, he tried to make the moves on the Phantasm, Andrea Belmont.
but you've got Helen Slater, and she's beautiful, and she looks great in the suit, and she gets the basics down. And you've got Peter O'Toole, who's awesome, and you've got what's her face from Network, and I can't remember her name. Faye Dunaway is just chewing up the scenery. So there's stuff in there, that still has some value to it. But yeah, it's a terrible movie. I won't defend it.
It's put like this. It wasn't. I mean, I think there was another thing where I heard about Supergirl was about the Crisis. She died in that. Her and Barry were supposed to be dead.
Well, and again, that was the only issue of Crisis of Infinite Earths that I got when it came out, and it definitely formed an opinion for me of Supergirl, and it was a great story. And there were Supergirl fans that are like, "Why is that everybody's favorite story? That's the one where they kill off my favorite character." But it's so well done. It's one of the best comic book deaths, I think.
I mean, between her and Barry, I feel like, if you're really about trying to do that Marvel continuity where, well, even Marvel doesn't do it anymore, where people, they kill characters and then they bring them back. But for a time, dead was dead, With DC, at least with their animated stuff, they really were about keep people dead. Which I think that's probably why I liked that stuff more, almost like when they killed Turpin was dead.
Well, and especially because they killed him on the animated show after basing him visually off of Jack Kirby. And so if Jack Kirby would lived a few extra years as Dan Turpin on that cartoon and they kill him at the end of it, it's going to sting. It's going to hurt, Yeah. So that was very effectively done.
Which I'm surprised in the comics they didn't draw Dan Turpin to look like he did on that show, which I'm sure I got a good reason why they didn't do it. But that's the thing, though. When I was watching those cartoons, I'm thinking the comic books are going to be exactly like this. Except, they had the Superman Adventures comics and the Batman Adventures comics. And I think they had Justice League Adventure comics about when that show came on. I know DC would love to do that, though. That's kind of a thing I miss. And when they did this new Batman comic that came out now, I got a little bit excited because I'm thinking, okay, you all using that. Like, these are the Lost episodes where the characters, if we had one more season, they would have appeared on here. If we didn't have the Bat embargo, they would have been on Justice League.
Yeah, and when those books were coming out, that was at a time where there were a lot of older fans that were not happy with all the As-Bat stuff and everything. And the both of those series are very well regarded. Mark Miller used to write the Superman one before he became a shock jock.
He went bad.
Before he went became a shock jock. And he's supposed to have written some really great Superman stories in that time period. And they also did one called Adventures in the DC Universe. It was decent. I don't think it was as good as the other series, but it was neat because they were showing what an animated series featuring their heroes of the late 90s time period would be like if they were included before.
And I kind of wish they would have done it.
Yeah. Well, I think
I wish they would have done it way back then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, ultimately, Justice League Unlimited essentially did that, you know? But it was kind of
But they did it as their contemporary. It was like a mixed version of the way everybody looked.
Yeah, but like with Adventures in the DC Universe, you actually got a few Wonder Woman solo stories. You got Kyle Rayner stories. You got Connor Hawke was in a few issues. You got to see characters that didn't ever get a spotlight in Justice League, or sometimes I think a few of them may have been embargoed and not available for use. So it's had a special place, but it wasn't as good as the other series either. You know, people really responded well to the Batman and Superman series.
I mean, because I don't know what it is. I think when DC does like their little stuff that's like tie into their cartoons or whatever, at least with the cartoons, I just get excited for it because I guess at the time when those came out, I didn't expect to see them in that style. You know, you got your big boy comic style.
And they had the Superman and Batman magazine out, and there, Mike Parobeck, before he died, who was one of the best people in drawing in that sort of Tim type style, was interpreting all their...
I think he was like, I think I like to compare it to the way Parobeck did it. Was like season 1 through 3 of how Batman animated series looked. Because everybody was pretty bulky looking. And,
but he had developed his style before the Bruce Timm animated model was created. So he could draw similar to that, but he was still drawing his own style. So it was a nice kind of contrast. A lot of the people who came afterwards, Ty Templeton in particular comes to mind, were basically just doing a Bruce Timm pastiche. It just kind of looked like him adapting the cartoons. Where what was nice about Parobeck was drawing in his own style that just happened to complement it.
Okay, because I think as a kid when I saw that stuff, I'm like, well, I mean, because I'm thinking I'm not gonna be able to draw like Brian Bolin, and I'm not gonna be able to draw like the artists of the '90s at the time, or John Bogdanov and all them. I think, well, I watch this cartoon all the time. They try to draw like that. I think as a kid, I couldn't do it quite right because there's a lot of curves and stuff, and the upper torsos were very wide and stuff like that, and the legs are almost very very small. I mean, better than what Rob Liefeld would do, but except it's cleaner. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But as they look like in the shows,
you look at it, and because there's not a lot of detail, you think it'd be easy to do, but you really have to have a good command of anatomy to play with the anatomy like that, and you have to have a great command of the line to draw with that level of simplicity. It's way easier to cover stuff
like
up.
That now.
Yeah, it's so much easier to cover stuff up in details. I mean, I'm not a great artist my own self. I'm pretty lousy, in fact, but I can crosshatch all over something to make it look, at least halfway decent just by covering it up all the mistakes with the crosshatching and so.
I mean, that's the thing, because I think when I was watching all that and reading all that, I know as a kid there was a lot of stuff where I was just absorbing. I was like a sponge for all this stuff where I'm like, I want to do that. And I think the older I got, like now, I'm not even sure now I can draw like Tim and all them, or even Parobeck. I mean, I try to do very simple, but it becomes pop art after a while the more I do it. It's like I got very thick outlines, very simple shapes for faces and muscles and stuff, because I know I'm not trying to do realistic. That's the thing. I think that's what it was as a kid. I had like Batman stickers for like the animated series, and I try to draw like that all the time. Got on the nerves of my teachers and stuff. And I think as a teenager, I called thinking myself a big boy artist. I'm thinking I'm gonna try to draw like they did in the books, and fell very short. I mean, Dan Jurgens drawing Superman, or Jim Aparo drawing Batman, or Graham Nolan and all of them. The artists who, when you look at their work, it can be a trading card or a poster. You know what I mean? That's the thing with '90s DC art. It's like it wasn't like Marvel art. And with Wonder Woman, I can tell like with her books, it was like the opposite of that. Where they weren't trying to do. It was before Diodato came in. It was '90s, making everything look like it was circa 1992, even though it was in like '95. I don't know. That's the weird thing with DC's art. It's like when I look at their stuff, it's Marvel has Jim Lee, and at the time DC didn't. Or Marvel had Todd McFarlane, which even though DC had Todd McFarlane, but Marvel let him go off the chain. All right, DC had Rob Liefeld, but Rob Liefeld wasn't going to stay there. So I don't know. I don't know what to say. It's like I have this weird relationship with. I like certain DC artists who draw the books, but I got my few favorites. I don't have like a whole list I can name you. Because I don't know what it is. DC tries to be artistic, art wise. It's trying to be realistic and fantastic. It's this weird little uncanny valley for me. Like I like John Bogdanov because that's cartoony. I like think who else? Kelly Jones because that's cartoony. Or if it looks like the cartoon, I'm all over it. But
Ed McGuinness is still my Superman artist.
Oh yeah, to me that's another one, because I think when I bought a few of his Superman books, I'm like, oh, this is like the cartoon. Because the way the way they drew Batman looked like he was on the new Batman Adventures.
Well, and what was cool about that is it was like the cartoons, but it was also fairly detailed, and certainly with that really crazy, imagey type of musculature. So it was almost like the best of both worlds to some degree.
Yeah, and I think because I had like 2 or 3 of those books from that time, and a tie-in to Our Worlds at War, and I think after that I wasn't buying much Superman again.
Yeah. Well, the problem was Jeff Loeb was writing the stories that Ed McGuinness was drawing, and I'm not a Jeff Loeb fan at all. So I would get drawn in wanting to look at the books, and then when I would start to read them, I'm like, oh yeah, this is I don't need this. This is what I want.
But, I mean, I know they didn't do Wonder Woman. I'm sure he probably would have done a terrible job at it. I don't know. Ed McGuinness drew Wonder Woman. Yeah,
McGuinness drew her in JLA Classified.
Okay.
He did the first, I think 3-issue arc with the Ultramarines, and it was the Magnificent Seven JLA, except that John Stewart was swapped out or swapped onto the team. So you got to see McGuinness draw him as well.
Okay, because that's another one I missed. I'd seen images of that cover, and that was about it.
I put that on my partner. I put that on my family. Oakland City represent. Address me as your majesty. Yeah, you can kiss the ring, but you can never touch the crown. I smoke a million Swisher blunts and I ain't never coming down. Bitch, you ain't no Barbie. I see you work at Arby's. Number 2, supersized. Hurry up, I'm starving. We think you're special. Dr. Ange. Artificial twins. Brad Leonard. Brian Morris. Chris Dunford, who added best description ever to our tweeted blurb. It's like drunk history with Frank and an issue of Who's Who published in the New 52. Chris Lydon. Dave's Comic Heroes blog. Derek W.C. Ed Moore. The Hammer Strikes. Random Geek. E-Stuff. Iowa's Joe is. JMT Productions. Julia Raul, who added Happy New Year. I want to say I love how you expressed the differences between Marvel and DC whenever it comes to religion in their universes, and how Captain America is kinda a DC hero but would be barring there. How in DC gods freely walk around and the JLA fought rogue angels. Kailash Jwalamaki, writer and media in charge. Keith G. Baker. Lorenzo Sleestack. Martin Gray. At Mart Gray, who added thank you very much. Happy New Year. Mazonga Daniel. Patriot. Mike at Send Aliens to Me. Men. Miguel Quiros. My Comic Book Collection 70s to 90s. Nucky 777. Nuno Quaresma. Once Upon a Geek. Richard Field. Roger Preeb. Ronald Clark. Sam Lowe. Scott X. Sean McLaughlin. Sean Phillips. Siskoid. Superbound. And Tim Price. The Podcrasher.
The preceding program is a non-profit fan production. Any copyrighted materials contained therein are believed borrowed under fair use with no copyright infringement intended. Please feel free to leave comments at Rolled Spines Productions WordPress blog. You can also send us Twitter comments through the Rolled Spine Podcast Twitter. Thank you for listening.